Well, welcome back everyone to session 3 of the Train the Tutor Trainer through the Florida Literacy Coalition. And I want to thank you so much again for joining us today. If you have not already typed your topic for the presentation assignment into the chat box, if you can go ahead and do that, that would be great. We'll talk a little bit more today about some of the tutor training content, and maybe you'll get some ideas. For those of you who are not sure what you're thinking about doing, we'll get some ideas today. So let's go ahead and get started. I will mention, I sent out an email earlier today. I'm doing something a little bit different. I had one of the participants in this course gave me some great feedback. And as tutor trainers, we always take the feedback that we get and we try to implement it so that we can, improve. We have to make improvements as trainers for ourselves as well. So I'm not going to be putting up the Train the Tutor Trainer notebook, because I did hear it was a little hard to see. It was a little small, the writing. So I've pretty much incorporated everything into one huge PowerPoint today. So hopefully that will work. And I'll take your feedback and let me know if it worked. Okay, great. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about some collection development, some different materials. These are mostly print resources that I like to refer to in my tutor trainings and when I work with learners. So some of the major publishers or providers in adult literacy education materials, and let me just start by saying this is actually, you have this PowerPoint in your resources, but I'm just going to describe it and we'll talk a little bit about it in more depth. So these are some of the major publishers and providers in adult literacy education. New Readers Press is put out by ProLiteracy, the International Literacy organization. You probably, if you haven't heard of New Readers Press, that's one that you want to get familiar with. Oxford University Press, Pearson, Hawthorne, Heinemann, Jossey Bass, Scholastic, Cambridge, Steckvon. They may have changed their name, Steckvon, and then Kaplan, and then ASTD or ATD is now td.org. So if you want to look at td.org, those are really training materials, but I wanted to put some in here for you to see. I mentioned that I like to use the Lit Start book. A lot of literacy programs like the Laubach Way to Reading or the Laubach Way to English. I think it's good to have a mixture in your program. When I get a new tutor, I always give them the Lit Start book, but we have these other materials available so that if they wanted to be incorporated into the lesson plans, they could be. So here's a couple of my favorites that are just general enrichment for staff and tutors. The Teach Anyone to Read there on the left by Lily Pope. I actually have that in print and I have it in Kindle format. That's how much I like that book. One of the things that explains in there is the Big 9, which are the 9 most popular words that make up written text. So for example, and, be, have, it, of, the, to, will, you. So those words make up 1 out of every 4 words that are out there in written text. So if you have your tutors work on the Big 9 with learners, that is certainly going to increase their fluency because they'll be able to recognize those words instantly as sight words, and their fluency will increase. You know, their speed and their flow of their reading will increase. At the last session, we talked about multiple intelligences. And that was the concept that came out from Howard Gardner. That's one of the books, The Frames of Mind. I like to read all kinds of things, like how learning sticks, or the educational psychology of learning. So I thought Make It Stick is a really cool book. You can always bring a couple of interesting tidbits into your trainings by mentioning something that you've read like that. I want to remind everybody, we're going to stop a little bit more for questions and answers. But if you have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat box, and Zara will bring it to my attention. Um, sometimes with Zoom, it's a little bit more difficult to get our attention when you have a question, and I don't want you to be hesitant. Please go ahead and ask us your questions. And like I said, there's a lot of collective knowledge in this room. Look, Isabella asked a question before we got started, and Faye had a great answer. So we want to encourage that. So here's a couple of materials that I like for curriculum design. I think these are really helpful for your staff and your tutors. There's a lot of educational philosophy. These can be helpful for those who don't have an educational degree or an educational background. Um, you know, when you study library science, they don't really teach you about literacy. That's something that you have to take on in addition to. So one of my favorites here is that Learning Theory Simplified. I love that book. I actually own all of these, but the Learning Theory Simplified, it literally goes over different educational theorists and explains the theory and how that could be implemented in classroom instruction. I've made a couple of slides for my continuing education workshops where we'll discuss Freire, or we'll discuss Bloom's taxonomy or whatever, and we'll say, how can you use this in your tutor, when your tutors are working with a learner. So it's a really great book, really simplistic, really gives you great ideas. Love that book. Here's a couple of books for trainer skills. So it has like adult learning theories, icebreakers, how to improve your speaking and platform skills, evaluation and return on investment. Are your tutors getting what they need out of your tutor trainings? You've probably heard of the Telling 8 training. That's a pretty popular one. There's even a second one now. I believe there might be 3 actually. There's like a more Telling 8 training. So there's several in that series. The Training Design Basics is another one I have. And then Kirkpatrick is considered a classic. The 4 levels of training evaluation. He's actually considered a classic that you should be aware of. We will be going over some of his theories when we talk about evaluating our own trainings. So you will hear a little bit more about Kirkpatrick. Okay, these are my all-time favorite, the Book of Lists. I literally have these. It's funny, I like to tell a story. I have a couple of these, and I had them in my office at my last job. And my last colleague, she liked them so much, she kept swiping them from my office. I mean, these are the best books. So I have, like, for example, I have the Reading Teacher's Book of Lists here, and I'll just give you an example. It really explains how to assess levels using the Fry readability graph, like how to actually assess what level your learner is reading on. This is great. It has sentence tunes. So, I did not say you stole my red hat. I did not say you stole my red hat. Just different ways to do intonation and emphasis. It has fluency, punctuation. It has how to figure out the optimal oral reading rate of your learner. It has just everything. Lists of contractions, punctuation guidelines. It has I love the problem English sounds for ELL. Has that in there. Close procedures, tongue twisters. There is so much. You could literally pick up any one of these Reading Teacher's Book of Lists and have a quick activity. I love all of these books. I even scan some of them in your resources under GED. I scanned a couple from the Math Teacher's Book of Lists on how to help somebody with the wording, with the reading in a word problem. I thought that's genius, right? We never think about the reading involved in a word problem. So in the GED section there in your resources, I put a couple little math things. Okay, here's a couple for English language learning. That ESL, ELL Teachers Book of Lists, love it. I'll just give an example of some of the things in there. It has a great chart for problem sounds, problem English sounds for ESL, ELL students. So for example, Chinese people would have difficulty with DG, or may have difficulty with L clusters. It's just amazing here. It tells you like what sounds, it has charts in here. What are the problem sounds for them? It has English, Spanish cognates. So for example, in English, the word would be active. In Spanish, the word would be activo, activo. So it can really help for different, cultures and languages. I know I mentioned the last time the non-reversible pairs. I love this as a thing. So for example, we say bacon and eggs, we say bed and breakfast, we say birds and bees, we say soap and water, we say salt and pepper, we say knife and fork, we say Jack and Jill. So this is a great exercise, not only to learn additional words in chunks, you're learning different sight words in chunks, but your English language learner is learning to speak in the correct word order. They love that. They love to feel like they want to sound like quote, quote in American. So this is just a great book. It has all kinds of words like related to time, seasons. It's just, you will love this book. It even talks about assessments and, different things in the back, like how to assess and things. Just great, great book. One of my favorites. And then the Oxford Picture Dictionary is a great one too. They make different versions. The one pictured here is just in English. They do make them in multi-languages, like for example, English and Brazilian Portuguese, or English and I think Urdu. So they really do make them in, like, I want to say it's over 10 different languages. They make the combo ones for the Oxford Picture Dictionaries. And they're really set up by themes. So it might be, shopping in the food store. It might be, in the office workplace. And it's definitely a great way to build up vocabulary. Great way to build up vocabulary. I always have these in the room when I'm doing an English conversation club. And then the pronunciation pairs is very interesting because it really explains how to do like tongue formation and how to actually pronounce different words. Definitely an interesting resource. Here's a couple more English language learning and teaching. There's Unlocking English Learners' Potential. That one really is great for your advanced English language learner. It talks about academic language and advanced vocabulary. For those of you who are working with, higher English language learners, or who want to go, back to college or want to start college, that's a great tips in there for that. Uncovering the Logic of English is just a good book, to read through. She has her own website, and she sells different materials on there as well. And then the Techniques and Principles in Language Teaching. It's a little academic, but I like to read those to get ideas and so forth. So as trainers, I would share with you some different resources that you might find helpful. Okay, learning difficulties or disabilities or neurodiversities. The Learning Disability Intervention Manual is gold. I just want to tell you, it is absolute gold. I did in your Google Share Drive under, I don't know if I called it learning difficulties or something like that. I did put in your shared drive, in your Google Share Drive, a sample of their strategies because it's so great. So it has 88 different checklists, like, if there's no phonemic awareness, it'll say, try this, try this. It literally gives you checklists how to help somebody, whether it's reading, writing, speaking. It's just one of the best books you'll ever see out there too, as a strategy for your tutors. If I think in the Google Share Drive, I included a list of all the different um, strategies that they have. If one sounds particularly interesting to you and you'd like me to scan it and send it, I'd be happy to do that. It's just a great book. Take a look at at that list. The Erlin Revolution, I'm going to talk a little bit about that more at our next session. I'm an Erlin certified screener, but I wasn't for many years. You don't have to be a certified screener to use Erlin, and it's the colored overlays. And I did include the mini quiz in your Google Share Drive to see if somebody would benefit from using a colored overlay. And then the Gillingham Manual is considered the classic when it comes to reading challenges and specific disabilities in reading. You can actually get certified in Orton Gillingham. I am not, but just something to mention to you. The Gillingham Manual is considered a classic as well. Should be on every tutoring shelf. These are a couple of assessments. Now, these are free, easy to use. They're not standardized. There's no certifications needed, and you can get a general starting point. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Fry. He has quite a few different books out there on how to teach reading, and I have like all of them because they're pretty reasonably priced, and you can get them readily. They're readily accessible off Amazon. So the informal reading assessments is a good one. Beta reading and language inventory is another one. And then you may be familiar with these old, the read, I'm going to call them old because I don't know if I'm not sure if New Readers Press sells them anymore. But they are actually available free. And I think I put them in your share drive. So the ESLOA and the read are different evaluations and assessments that you can use. In the shared drive, I also put some other things. I put a couple other little things, like I put some CASA's information and a freebie assessment that you can use in there as well. Some writing and grammar resources. So the first one there, Jennifer Saravallo, she has the Writing Strategies book. She just came out with another one that's fantastic. I think she has at least 4 different books out, and it's like Understanding Texts and Readers. She has the Reading Strategies book, and she literally just came out with a new one, and I have it in my library. But they're really fantastic. She gives great strategies on how to read better, write better. She even throws in little assessments in her books and things. Great books. The Blue Book of Grammar and Punctuation. This one has reproducible quizzes, which I think is great. So you're not breaking any copyright law. You're allowed to reproduce those quizzes in there. And then I just included the writing for the GED test in there as well. Okay, some math resources. You may have heard of the Teaching Adults series from New Readers Press. They make one just on math. The Math Teacher's Book of Lists. I love that book. I gave you a couple of reproducibles in the Google Share Drive. I love their chapters on how to overcome math anxiety. And I've actually done presentations for those going for their GED on how to overcome the math anxiety. So there's some great stuff in there. And then Breakthrough to Math is a very detailed series. There's a lot of books in this series, but it's very broken down by topic. So, I mean, it has one just on word problems. It has one on fractions. It has one on, multiplication tables. It's definitely a great series to have for those needing to pass any of the math portions of the GED, if that's what you're working on in your program. some citizenship resources. You can download the book from the USCIS, that's the United States Citizen Immigration Services. You can actually download the book for free. You can purchase the books as well from them. And then the other ones are from New Readers Press that I have shown here. If you ever have the opportunity, I will say when I was in Florida, I thought the USCIS did amazing, amazing, reaching out to us in the library. So they would come to our library a couple times a year and do, immigration 101 or naturalization 101. And we would advertise it to the general public, but I would also encourage learners and or tutors to come. And one of the favorite things, and I've worked with two different people in Florida from that office, they would do a mock interview. They would do like a role play, a mock interview, what to expect when you come in, and really valuable information. Sometimes they offer tutor training in the USCIS office there in Tampa, if anybody's, and they must offer it in other areas in Florida. I think Jacksonville too. But great, great. I highly recommend if you can spend a day and they have it, offered, I would recommend taking it. Here are a few workforce and readiness and employability skills. Road to Work is a series, 3 book in that series, like choosing the job, applying, and then succeeding. The Job Success series, and then building strong vocabulary. It's more of a workbook, but it does have little multiple choice activities to do and so forth. If this is something that you would like to offer in your literacy program, these might be something to consider. Now, pro literacy certification is no longer available, but I wanted to point out these books so you could see them. So the teaching adults, I think they make the adult education, which is the literacy resource one, the blue one. Then they make the ESOL or the ESL one, and then they do make the GED one as well. These are the 4 books that they had wanted you to study to be able to pass that pro literacy exam, which consisted of 3 components. So if pro literacy thinks these are their cream of the crop, I thought I'd leave the slide in just to mention them to you. Some literacy programs, I believe, use the Tutor book. And I mentioned I give out the Lit Start, but I've seen many literacy programs give out the Tutor as the main book. It's a fantastic book. It's written by Ruth Colvin. Ruth Colvin is the one that started up, what is it? Literacy Volunteers of America in New York. Ruth Colvin is like considered the rock star of literacy. Ruth Colvin, and she started up the Literacy Volunteers of America in New York, which combined with pro literacy. And yeah, I had the opportunity to actually meet her at one of the Florida Literacy conferences several years ago. So I actually have a signed copy of Tutor from her. She's my rock star. So I put this in here for any of you that are working in higher education or schools. These are 2 books. You can get your tutoring program certified. It's called something like CRLA, the College Reading CRLA program. So they have peer tutoring where they can you train your college students to be tutors to other college students in need. And so I have a slide in there just in case anybody's interested in knowing about that. Actually, really, really good material in the in these, believe it or not. I actually kept some scanned up because they were that good. Really, I got some tips from this too. So, and here are some resources for family literacy. So these can be used with those who are lower adult education learners and their families. The Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons is a great one. The Read Aloud Family is great too. And then Blast Off to Reading is a little bit for those who have some reading challenges, and it's based on the Orton Gillingham methodology. And there's quite a bit of flashcards you can download. It gives you all kinds of things, resources in there as well.
Susan, are you still showing your PowerPoint?
Yeah, you're not seeing it?
I personally am not, but maybe that's me. I was.
Is everybody seeing it? Okay.
Yes,
I
I
can
see
see
it.
it.
I can see it.
Okay. Sorry, Trish. Maybe
Okay.
maybe you got to go back in and out.
I have it. I got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
Sorry.
Let's see here. See a couple things in the chat, just checking a little bit.
While we're on a little bit of a break, I just want to tell everyone if you could please check your name and see if you have Susan's name written down, just because for attendance purposes and when you guys put questions in the chat, I don't know who I'm talking to. So just make sure you double check and then press your on your screen and you'll see the 3 dots on the right hand side. Or if you just want to put your name in the chat, I can change your name for you. Thank you.
I challenge for Trump and they've been so careless.
We heard some.
Oh, I think somebody needs to mute, or Zara, if you can mute them. I did mention these the other day. These are some manipulatives that are great as an icebreaker, or could be for kinesthetic hands-on learners. These are, you can search thumb ball on Amazon, and they make 4-inch or 6-inch. These prices really range from like $20 to almost like $35. And the 2 brands that are pretty popular are Talacore or the Trainer's Warehouse.
Susan,
Yes.
you can buy a white and black soccer ball and number the squares with a magic marker with 1 through 26 or 27. And then you have 27 options lists that you can make so many lists. You just have to have somebody monitor the list and translate what number the thumb lands on. And it's cheaper. $9 at Walmart for a soccer ball.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Faye. That's great. So what's your favorite tutor resource? Faye just taught us a little bit about a soccer ball, but I'm sure there's different resources that you're using. If you want to go ahead and share with the rest of the group, that would be great.
I like StoryCorps and This I Believe. This I Believe they both have short audios. And I think StoryCorps actually has some videos, I'm not sure, but This I Believe has a transcript of the audio. So you have listening practice as well as reading practice and working together. So those 2, and they're just basically what I said, thisibelieve.org and StoryCorps.
We'll be checking those out. Anybody else have anything that they would like to share? Or any questions about any of the materials we just looked at?
We have a couple people in the chat who answered. Vonda Bryant said News for You paper and online for students and volunteers and staff. Mona Peters says her main resource is finding reading material that's on the learner's level, and she likes the weekly reader in the newspapers.
Nice.
You guys can feel free to unmute and speak aloud, or you can submit in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. Isabella Rowan said that she likes the books by Grassroots Press.
Oh, yes.
This is Vonda. I wanted to just, talk a little bit more about News for You. I've found that sometimes when we have to have a minute person fill in for a volunteer teacher for our English classes, maybe it's a staff, the News for You has always been a go-to. And they can go online and print an article, and all of the lesson plan is already there. The whole newspaper is useful for a class and even sometimes several classes. So I find it to be a great resource, and we have been purchasing the papers, and we distribute them to the about 30 branches, but we also give the website to volunteer tutors as well as to staff who are teaching adults. And it's good for ESOL as well as basic education students.
That sounds great. Thank you for that,
This
Vonda.
this is Lisa Anderson. I posted in the link a website to abcenglish.org, and that's something that we started actually using during COVID because it has basically presentations like PowerPoint style, Google Sheets, I believe is what she actually uses, but presentations where you can go through a whole lesson of vocabulary, grammar, systematic phonics, and it's geared for non-English speaking adult learners. So it uses good contextual situations and imagery, a lot of nice graphic pictures, and has incorporated into especially the systematic phonics portion a very well scaffolded lessons for the teacher, but it has little clues at the bottom. Like if you don't have educational background or are not sure how to implement each page of the lesson or each slide that comes up, they have like a little sneak peek of what the teacher or tutor should say or do or pronounce or emphasize on each slide as you go. So it's a really good open and shut type of thing, especially if you have to work virtually or you need some visuals for a class presentation. Yeah.
That was the abceng.org, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
perfect, perfect.
ABC English is what it's called. It's actually created by someone from the classroom. So she started it there and it's become a whole big thing. It's very useful.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
We have a couple more responses. Linda likes wordless books where the learner describes the illustration, the tutor writes it down, and the learner reads it back. And then Gloria uses the Teaching Adults book, a literacy resource from Pro Literacy.
Great, great.
Which I also want to let you guys know, I know we talked about this in the first meeting, but FLC does offer a limited amount of pro literacy books for trainings. So if you submit a form on the website, which I'll put in the chat again, you can request those for free.
That's great. Thank you, Zara. Okay, we're going to take a look now. If you want to follow along, you can. I'm not going to bring the notebook up. I'm just going to be using the PowerPoint. So the material is on pages 25 and 26 in the notebook. And I skipped this the last time, and we're going to talk a little bit about when we have a tutor training, and not necessarily even a tutor training. If you're a presenter and you go out and you speak to groups sometimes, I have certainly been put on the spot talking to 70 people. One that comes to mind is I was once talking to the Daughters of the American Revolution, pretty big group, about 70 people were in that group. And, sometimes people will just, scream out something like, why do we have literacy? Or they want to get political, or, our schools are failing. And how do we handle that? How do we handle that with, with grace? So I thought we'd talk a little bit about this, and it can happen in your tutor trainings as well. So there is a theory called Tuckman's model of group development, and we're going to take a look at 7 types of common interruptions when we're doing a tutor training or when we're doing some kind of a literacy presentation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why these interruptions may occur. And we're going to talk a little bit about some trainer strategies to overcome these interruptions. And after we take a look at these slides, if somebody has a good story, we'd probably love to hear it. Okay, so Tuckman's model of group development. Well, the group comes together, so we're in the forming stage. And then I've seen this even in tutor trainings. I've seen this when I hire new staff in a particular building location. I've seen this when I move staff in a building or location. So the group comes together and then they experience conflict. They call that the storming phase. You know, everybody fights for their footage. They fight for, oh, wait, that was mine, or this, or, you know, whatever it is. They fight for attention or whatever the storming is occurring. And then the group experiences purpose. We're coming together. We're going to do this tutoring. We're going to work together. And they have a norming stage. They call that the norming stage. And we achieve goals, norming stage. And then we perform. We become the performing stage. Some groups will never reach that performing stage. I'm sure we've all worked in dysfunctional places before where we're never going to reach that performing stage. Unfortunately, some places get stuck in the storming or the norming. So anyway, the point of this is just to be aware that this exists. This group psychology exists. It is in your notebook. And I have given you this PowerPoint. It's in your Google resources as well, your Google Share Drive. And then some groups will adjourn and they will leave. This can be with task forces. This can be if you have tutors that are working together on a project. Or let's say you have some tutors that are teaching joint co-teaching, you know, a pre-GED class for 12 weeks. So just keep in mind that this Tuckman's model of group development does exist. So let's take a look at this first challenging behavior. So what do you do if you have somebody in your class? Let's say you're holding a 2-day new tutor training, and you have somebody in your class that keeps interrupting you and they challenge your knowledge. You know, why do they do this? Well, they want to be acknowledged because they do have a lot of expertise. And, you know, many times the person will, you know, have great expertise that's coming. That's the great thing about the tutors that we work with. A lot of them are retired teachers, retired educators. A lot of them have vast knowledge, and they're not afraid to take on the challenge of working with a tutor. So we have to be thankful for that. At the same time, they may know more than you, or they may act like they know more than you. So what I do is I usually go ahead and I give them the floor for a couple minutes. You know, I'll say, did everybody hear what Mary said? Mary had a great point. Mary, could you explain that in detail? Or, you know, or I give the person the limelight for a couple of minutes, and then it's usually over with at that point. So you know, usually they do want to share their expertise, and then you can go right back to your training. Okay, number 2, challenging behavior. Let's say 2 tutors are carrying on a side conversation in the back of your room. Well, we shouldn't assume that they're being disrespectful. One may have turned to the other potential tutor and said, wait a second, I didn't understand that. Or what was that word she said? Or, you know, so it may not be disrespectful. They may not be talking just for the heck of talking. You know, they may have had a legitimate question about something that you said or one of the other trainers in the room said. If it continues and they're like friends, I think sometimes just walking towards them and just, you don't even have to say anything. You just put your hand right on their table and they usually stop. Okay, this one can be tough. Number 3, difficult behavior. If they make an inappropriate remark, if whether it sounds sexist or racist, or if they're culturally insensitive, you have to be careful that it doesn't ruin the whole vibe and mood in the room. I mean, we are here to help people speak English many times, and we have to respect their cultures and their diversities. And once in a while, you'll get somebody that will say something, and you think to yourself, wow, I will never match that person up with an English language learner. It will happen. You probably will come across somebody somewhere along the line. And, you know, so just be aware. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't realize how it sounded. Maybe they're unaware of how that sounded. So, I mean, if it continues, then you have to address it as the trainer, as the teacher in that room. You need to address that and talk to them privately, or you may have to come right out and say, oh, that doesn't line with our values of this literacy organization, or yeah, and this literacy organization, we support English language learners, or something like that, and try to move on. And probably you may never match that person. Number 4, monopolizing the discussion. So again, we have a lot of talented people that come to our trainings. Sometimes we might need to, especially if we're in a face-to-face classroom, we might need to say, oh, I'd like to hear from so-and-so, or do you have something? Do you have an idea? And call them out by names. I love the tutor name tents. So this way you can see everybody's name, and you can go ahead and, ask, did you have an idea, or did you have something to add to it? You can call out people by name. But at the same time, we want to appreciate the one showing their expertise, because we don't want to squash their enthusiasm. So it's just that sometimes we need to get others to talk and others to participate as well. Well, I did have this before. I have had, I had a potential tutor, and oh my golly, it was just so negative, and I thought, how are we going to handle this? Well, just have to keep being positive, and it could be because they have more important things on their mind, and maybe they're not really up to the tutoring, and they didn't admit that to themselves. They didn't realize how time consuming it was going to be. That's what I found. When anybody gets really negative, it's usually because they did not realize how time consuming tutoring can actually be, or they did not realize how much we were going to ask them to plan, or how much we were going to ask them to create lessons, or so forth. So I like to say it's because they have more important things on their mind. At the same time, does the participant have a valid complaint? And does the rest of the class feel the same way? So, don't discount everything, but, it's very hard when you do, if any of you are doing your own evaluations after you have a tutor training workshop, it can be challenging. I actually like to, just because I'm a numbers geek, I like to figure out, like, however many turned in the response, I like to figure out, 98% said that they, 98% of the participants said that they benefited from the resources that were shared at this tutor training workshop. I actually like to figure out my percentages of who said this or that, and my little comments I like to keep. And no matter what, I've gone out there and taught for the Florida Literacy Coalition in other literacy programs. They've sent me as the trainer. And no matter what, you're always going to get feedback that you don't know what to do with. So I'll give you an example. I tend to go for the 2-day 12-hour training, back to back 2 days. And I'll have people say, well, this should have been 3 days. This should have been longer, or I'll have people say this was too long, or, I like to give a little folder of handouts to all of my participants. And people have said, well, I don't want this folder because it's too much a waste of paper. I'm going to turn it back in. I've had other people tell me, I love this folder and I'm going to refer back to this folder all the time. So, you have to try and take, don't change your tutor training just for the sake of change, if that makes sense. Listen to what the participants say, and then you have to decide, what you're going to do from there. So, okay, number 6, withdrawing. Sometimes a participant, it just may be a personal thing. Maybe they're feeling ill. Maybe they're feeling excluded. Maybe they're worried, or maybe they're feeling overwhelmed. I have seen people feel overwhelmed when they've taken a new tutor training that they didn't realize as much was going to be involved. That's why when I put up the new tutor training objectives, and I like to leave it up in the room at all times, and I like to refer back to it. That's my preferred methodology, is to keep the tutor training objectives up, posted in the room throughout the training, and refer back to it. I like to ask them straight out, is this what you expected? When you signed up for this tutor training, is this what you expected? And when people really read it over, most of the time people will shake their head and say yes. If you're seeing that one of your potential tutors is withdrawing, it could be that they're feeling overwhelmed. They just may need a little more hand-holding. Maybe you can get them into the spot, that makes them feel that they're contributing. But yeah. So don't assume it's disinterest. Talk to the participant during a break. If feeling excluded, you can always have them lead an activity. So number 7, if they go off on a tangent and like they miss the point, it just could be a simple misunderstanding or maybe confusion. Here we have to be professional and sensitive, and we're not going to laugh. We're going to find something that they said that we can make relevant. I'm sure there's something good that you can find out of that statement that they said. So. I think it's really important that we keep calm and that we improve our reaction. And we know that these behaviors aren't personal, and that we have to understand, that the potential tutor, that there's a reason for it. And, identify your own triggers. I have learned to stay really calm. I have taught at conferences. I have taught the Train the Tutor trainer at the pre-conference, and I have had some people say some pretty amazing things to me over the years. Like I have a PhD. What could I possibly learn from you? So, I'm of the mindset, if you learn one thing, you've learned something. But it's it's just how you handle it. Are you gonna just remain calm, remain professional. And if you can work with somebody to help you role play, if you have another trainer with you, and you can role play with them, it might be a good thing. I've had people where, I think I've mentioned, we've done used to do a leadership academy, 2 different ones actually. We did like a citizens academy and a leadership academy. And they always want to get so political and ask things like that. And I just always said something like, well, we won't be able to change. I said something to the effect like, we won't have all the answers to schooling and what happens with people and why they drop out of school and so forth, but we can work together to build a stronger community here. And that's what our literacy program does. we work together to build a stronger community. You know, just turn it around, be positive, don't get caught into their, negativity. So what questions do you have about anything that we've covered so far today? Or comments? Anybody have a really good story? Anybody have a really, really good story? Like you just can't believe how you handled that? Come on, somebody has to have a good story out there.
Well, I don't have a good story, but I've got a good method.
Okay.
You have a pause button on your breastbone right by your heart. If somebody says something that you go, yeah, just put your hand right there, push pause and breathe.
Yeah.
And then like the character that said, I've got a PhD, what can I learn from you? Possibly nothing, but possibly something. Why don't you stick around and see? Like you said, it's not a personal attack. It's always about the person that's saying it, not the person they're saying it to. We give away a lot of information about ourselves in the wisecracks and comments that we make. So on the receiving end, just pause, breathe. It'll come to you what nice, gentle, wise words to say. Expect that you can do that, and you will.
That's great, Faye.
When I worked in call centers, we would occasionally get the irate call, and they'd start, screaming or hollering or cursing or whatever. And you kind of have an immediate reaction. Your heart starts beating fast. Your pulse is going off in your head. And they recommended that we look in a mirror, have a mirror on our desk, and look in that mirror and start judging our own self and our reaction. Just, in other words, you have to pace yourself down with the reaction, at least not show an immediate rage reaction yourself. Of course, you'd lose your job if you did that anyway.
That's great. Thank you, Mona.
You can always validate the other person. You can always say, boy, you're really angry, or wow, you're really upset. And it kind of deflates the situation. And can you tell me more about why you're so angry? Can you tell me more about why you're so upset? It puts the focus back on the person and allows them to know that they've been heard, because sometimes it's just a matter of not ever being heard.
That's a good point. That's definitely a good point. If I'm doing an in-person training and I need to stall for time because I need to gather my own thoughts for a minute, one of my secret techniques is I will say we need to look at the book. I will say, okay, everybody go ahead and pick up your Let's Start book. We're going to turn to page 76. And that gives me a couple of minutes to compose myself. That was one of the things that I learned, like that'll give me, let them open up to start to take a look at that. And I act like I'm looking through my material and it just it stalls. It gives me a couple minutes. So that's my secret. If I tell you to turn to page something, I'm stalling for a minute or two.
Hi, this is Vonda.
Hi, Vonda.
In 2008, I lost my staff, and so I had to do trainings. About once a month is how we had it scheduled for tutors, almost alone with no one else there with me. So I ran out of breath and out of energy a lot because it was the basic training. And we were there the whole day. I gave them an hour lunch and 2 breaks. But a lot of times I kind of started requiring the volunteers and staff, I would give them responsibilities to do. Like I would bring out the high-low collection, put it on the tables and tell them to take 2 or 3 of them, review over them and tell me something that you learned over just reading the cover or the first chapter or something. And while they're doing that, I'm preparing for the next sessions or sections that I need to cover. And then when we have that time, we have each one of them to talk about, oh, this book is about blah, blah, blah. And they give a summary of what's in the book and what resources that, a person can use this for, what program or what class they can use it for. So that was the way that I got a breather, was
Yeah.
to turn it on to the attendees and give them some responsibilities, some assignments to do, or tell me how they're going to teach this lesson. And even if everybody had the same one, all the participants would have something different they would add to the lesson to make it more exciting for the student.
That's great, Wanda. That's a great tip.
That's also a great way to involve your students in self-teaching and teaching each other. Takes a load off of the instructor, and it's empowering to the students.
Absolutely.
I do this, it's similar to what you're talking about. It's called a jigsaw activity. And I love the Lit Start book so much that I really want the people that we're training, the adults that we're training, to really know a lot about that book before they leave the training. So the jigsaw strategy, I'll break the group up into like 2 or 3 in a group, and they'll each take a chapter. They'll become masters of that chapter, do like on chart paper, the most important things of that chapter. And then they get to present each chapter to the group. So it's a little bit more, they're engaged a little bit about, and then they have a little bit more of a knowledge. They become experts in that chapter.
That's great. I love to do small group work, and that's one of the recommendations that Pro Literacy makes. I do find that more of a challenge when we have something like online like this, but
Mhm.
I agree with you, Trish, definitely. Okay, great. Okay. Just checking the chat box real quick. I think we're up to date. Okay, so the next few things we're going to talk about covers pages 31 to 34 in your Train the Tutor Trainer notebook. And this is an exercise that I actually put in your Google Share Drive. It's in the Train the Tutor Trainer book on page 34. I like to do this one with my tutors. I do this at a new tutor training workshop. So we talk about how do we keep adults motivated to learn. And adults will tend to be more motivated when they believe it will help them to solve problems in their lives. And I like to talk about, think about this for a minute. When you were in school and you had to learn 2x minus 3y equals 43z, you thought, when the heck am I ever going to learn to use this? Or when will I use this in real life? So a lot of times adults are more motivated to learn when they see it actually helping them in their life. Adults tend to be more motivated by internal payoffs, quality of life, satisfaction, self-esteem. So this particular exercise that I have in your notebook and in the Google Share Drive, I like to have the participants write the answers in. So if you look at it, it's basically a blank paper. I just have, the 3 keys to keeping adults motivated to learn is up there. And I have them write in 1, 2, and 3. And it's just another technique so that I'm not handing them everything that's already done, on a sheet. I'm having them participate by writing it in. So this is just something that I came up with. And so, okay, so anyway, to fill in the answers, 1 is respect, 2 is relevancy, and 3 is immediacy. So when I teach this, I will throw the question out there, well, what do I mean by respect? And, I'll get feedback such as, well, we treat our learners as adults and not children. We accept our learner. We accept their culture. We don't judge. Most importantly, when we respect the learner, we believe in the learner. We believe that the learner has potential and that the learner can learn. We involve the learner when we make decisions. I love this one. Be open to learn from your learner. I love learning from the learners. And we use the learner's first name only if we allow them to use our first name. It should be an equal partnership. So that's what we mean by respect. Relevancy. Well, what do I mean by relevance? You know, can the learner relate to this? Does it interest the learner? Learners want to be able to apply what they have learned into their present lives. And then immediacy. Adult learners are busy people. They want to focus on what is important to them and what are their goals. So I like to give a story here or there in my tutor trainings. And it's funny because whenever I've gone out and presented or talked, I've even seen some of my big bosses in the back. The minute I say, I want to tell you a story about a learner, it doesn't matter what he was writing or this or that, he would stop and listen. So I actually like to say that I want to tell you a story about a learner. So I'm going to call her Mary, and she is a waitress in a local restaurant where they have a big breakfast clientele. And so Mary came to our literacy program, and she really wanted to succeed more in her day-to-day job. And she struggled with writing. So we made flashcards. We made flashcards that were immediate and relevant to help Mary. She needed to know how to write pancakes, and she needed to know how to write eggs Benedict, and she needed to know how to write orange juice or whatever, you know, whenever she was taking her orders. So that was important to Mary, and that's what we focused on. So sometimes you may have the best perfect plans laid out for your learner, but sometimes they want something that's relevant and immediate to them. And so this was the case with Mary. And if you saw Mary, because I actually did see this Mary, I'd go into her restaurant, you would not know that she struggled with literacy. I mean, she hid it very well. So always have a story. That's a true story, by the way. Mary was a great person in Florida. Yeah, always have a good story about something, and know in the middle of your tutor training or in whatever presentation you're doing, I like to say that. I say, I'm going to tell you a story, and you will see everybody will look up. Everybody will stop their writing and will look up. Okay, so going back to this particular exercise, this is one that I like to do it in new tutor training. The second part of it, Dr. Raymond Wodlowski, let me say it again, Wodlowski, he does have a lot of information. He's done research on adult learning, and he says that adult learning is based on 4 factors. One, and I have my tutors write this in. I have given them just the blank sheet that's in your Google Share Drive with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have them write this in. Success, and we talk about how adults do want to be successful learners. They want to make progress. They want to see that they're making progress, and they want to be successful. That's why sometimes when you ask them a question, and they can answer the question, like especially when it's a reading comprehension question, and they actually want to fool you that they understood it, okay? And they don't want to let you down. They put tutors sometimes on a pedestal, and they don't want to let you down. Okay, so 1 is success. 2 is volition. Adults want to have a sense of choice in their learning. They want to be part of the team. 3, value. Adults want to learn something that they value, take their interests, to heart, show them how it can be applied immediately to their life, how it will improve their life immediately. And then 4 is enjoyment. Adults want to experience their learning as pleasurable. So I like this little activity that I do with I do this with my new tutors. And again, I've given this to you in your book and in your share drive. Okay, the next thing is pages 31 to 35 in the TTT notebook. We'll take a little bit more of a look now. Okay, cultural differences. So you probably want to touch upon cultural differences in your new tutor training. This is on page 35 in your book. And if you use Let's Start, it's on page 77. They have a list. Probably want to explain that, you know, the family traditions, we need to respect cultural traditions. You know, tutors should ask their learners, tell me about your culture, and maybe learn and read about their culture. And we want to share maybe American cultural information with them or holiday traditions. You could even do something fun like carve a pumpkin. So these are the things that we talk about in the tutor trainings when I conduct them. You know, education for English language learners can be so vastly different. They can have little formal education in their native country, or they could be highly educated in their native language and just coming here to start over and to learn the English language. I've seen people where they were farmers, and I've seen people where they were doctors. So it doesn't matter, you know, where they are, as long as we try to serve them as best we can. So time, work, and leisure. So, you know, some cultures see and judge time differently. You know, either by the clock or they can be flexible. And I think this is important for tutors to understand because, you know, some people may think, you know, 10 minutes late and they're really upset about it, but the learner's culture may be forgiving for that. So we have to have the tutors understand that we may not all see time the same. So, you know, like the United States, Germany, and Japan, we tend to be faster paced, you know, time is money, be on time. Whereas the Middle East and Latin American countries might be slower paced. And they can be very family oriented. So I think as long as we have an understanding and we let the tutors know that they need to have, you know, be open-minded to this and to be accepting of this. And then other would be like gestures and personal space and eye contact. You know, be aware of pointing, be aware of gestures, you know, take the cues from the student, you know, don't crowd them, don't touch them, you know, you have to be aware of all those things. For those of you that are teaching, are you going over the cultural differences in your tutor trainings? Or if not, will you be?
One thing that we always point out is the okay, the thumb and finger together with the fingers up. Very good in Europe and this country, but in the Middle East, you turn it sideways and throw your fingers forward, and it's saying, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Those are fighting. And then the I'm giving away my presentation. I'll have to change it. But the other one, thumbs up. Anybody with a Latin background from ancient Roman times, it's been some way a yes or no, thumbs down or thumbs up. But, and I don't know what it is, but it's a not nice gesture in the Middle East. I can't find anybody that will tell me what it is. I don't know if I've got profanity barred on my Google search or whatever, but it's pejorative is the word that is used. So yeah, gestures are, and it's much better to point or gesture with your whole hand than with your finger, because even I was raised, don't point your finger at me, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of my volunteer trainers, She did a great presentation. I'll look and see if she has that in there about, because she really did all the different gestures and what they meant. I'll look and see if it's in there, if I can find it. Okay, this is page 37 in the notebook. Okay, we did talk a little bit about characteristics of good tutors. In your shared drive, I have put this pro-literacy slide if you want to use it. I actually have all of the pro-literacy tutor trainings downloaded. I don't really use a lot of it. I think I mentioned last time that they have a free seminar coming up to go over their different materials. It's only about a half an hour and you do have to sign up for it. You do have to be a member. I don't use a lot of their slides, but this is one that I do use. I kind of like this. I'll throw this one up quick after we talk about characteristics of good tutors. I think I mentioned to you, I like to actually have the group tell me what are some characteristics of good tutors, and we just like kind of write them on the whiteboard or write them on a big poster paper and leave it up around the room. I think it kind of gives you know, when people are giving input, it gets the discussion going. So that's what I like to do, but I will pop this slide up as well. Okay, pages 38 to 41 in the notebook. Okay, so this I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, what are you giving out at your new tutor training? So this is an example of what I'm giving out. It's a folder, and I do have my 2 different training agendas for session 1 and session 2. I have a lot of handouts that I give out, and some I've given you in the shared drive. So there's 2 schools of thought here. Do you hand them the complete folder like this right when they come in, or do you have it sitting there along with your main book that you're going to be using? Or do you hand out each, like let's say for example, you teach language experience approach. Do you hand out the handout like the tips on how to teach language experience approach, you know, right before you do the session, or are you putting everything in the folder ahead of time? So there's 2 schools of thought. If I'm teaching alone, I'm putting it in the folder like this and handing it at one time. But I'm using different colored paper. So this way, because the potential tutors will shuffle this around and will not keep the order that you've put it in. Especially if you're teaching 2 days, they will have to look through that and pull this out and pull this out. So what I'll say is that's why I do color coded. So if I'm teaching alone and I'm handing this folder out, I'm saying, okay, everybody, we're going to take a look at the word recognition strategies. It's the green colored paper in your folder. And this way they see it right away. It's the green colored. So when they've shuffled it around, that we can still find it quickly and get on track. If I'm working with 2 or 3 trainers, I actually like to hand it out right when we're doing the session. I do. So that's my thought. Anybody else have any school of thought on how you hand out training materials during your training?
When I was trained, they handed a folder. Now, I'm a retired teacher and I was a bit overwhelmed. And I am so aware of how people who are coming to the table that don't have an education background, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can just imagine how they're feeling. There was just so much content. If you're when you
Yes.
give out a folder, you're going to have a tendency to go look through it. And
Mhm.
it's just a lot of material and topics that I wasn't familiar with. And I just got a little bit of an overwhelming feeling. So I would probably tend to do what you're recommending is give out if you have the wherewithal to have the people and to move around and do it. If you're by yourself, it's a little bit more organization, but I think it can have a negative effect, which you don't want to have.
Yep. I agree. My favorite is to hand it out right when I'm teaching that topic. And then I still give them a folder and they can capture it all in the folder and keep it in the folder. But I don't even usually give the agenda 2 until the next morning. I don't even give them the session 2 until the next morning.
Mhm.
That's what I like to do.
So you do an agenda for day 1 and agenda for day 2.
I do. I actually have those in the share drive. If you want to take a look, I have a, and I think I've mentioned before, I have a separate one just for the trainer, where it literally says how much time we're going to be teaching, or, you know, it's a guideline. It doesn't have to be exact, but I think it's good to have a guideline. I still like the colored papers, and I get so many comments over the years. It doesn't matter what county I was teaching in, whether it was my own county or a different county. People would say, love the rainbow handouts. People would always say they love the color. And, you know, it kind of, when you're reviewing things, you can say, okay, remember the total physical response? That was the blue paper. Let's pull that out again. Or remember the reading comprehension strategies? That's the green one. Let's pull that out and take another look at that. Or, you know, it kind of helps. I love the colored papers. Okay, I have also put this in the Google Share Drive for you. Some of you may know this menu. It's called the AMERRUSS. It's like Ameris, which stands for American in Russian. It has been around forever. I don't know if any of you are using this. I use it still. It's corny, but I use it. It's an exercise in understanding. So I will put this up. I'll say, Matt, you know, I will hand out, by the way, I have the handouts in your share drive, and I suggest you do the menu in maybe white, and then you do the answer key in like a different color, because you don't want to hand out the answer key before you've handed out the menu, if that makes sense. And so for years, it was always the menu was in white and the answer key was in light blue. And one time we accidentally switched it around. So just be aware, you know, if you're doing something like that. Okay, so I would have this up here. I would say, imagine you're in a restaurant with friends. Please choose one item from each section of the following menu. Now we'll have the paper menu in front of them, but I'll also put this up. And you do have to ask if anybody speaks Russian, or please, if anybody is familiar with Russian, don't give it away. And then you have the participants look at this menu and you say, okay, what would you pick? You know, what would you pick and why? I like to ask so go ahead, if you're not familiar with this, what would you pick and why?
I would pick tomato soup because I don't eat meat and I can see chicken and hamburger on there, and tomato soup is the only other one that I can read.
So Vonda is thankful that she could read something and understand something.
And it's not that expensive either. So that's what I would choose, tomato soup. It's so funny because I went to college with someone who was dyslexic, and every time she went to the restaurant, she would just have whatever we were having. We had to figure out that she was saying things
Yes.
backwards, and she didn't want to take the time to try and figure out what was written there. So it's very common for new readers or people who struggle with reading, whether they know the language or not, to kind of just choose what other people are choosing at the table.
Absolutely, Vonda. You sound like you're doing this. Have you used this before?
Have used Amorous. I haven't used the menu, but I have used the Amorous, and I use it every time in my training because it doesn't get old. But I always
Yeah.
ask, do anybody, speak, read, or write in Russian? If you do, speak now or forever hold your peace. So
Yes, absolutely. This activity leads to good coping strategy discussion. Okay, should we take a little bit look at the what menu item did you select? Did you make your choice? Some people will say they picked the most expensive item if you do this activity. Some people will say they chose the cheapest item. Some people were thankful, like Vonda said, for what she could read. She could read tomato. She could read tomato soup. And what coping strategies? Vonda talked a little bit about it, how she knew somebody that would actually just have what everybody else was having. I'll just have what they're having. Or maybe they forgot their glasses. They say, I forgot my glasses. What should I have? Or what do you recommend? Or I'll have what he's having. So why did we go through this exercise? And how did this exercise make you feel? So my tutors tend to enjoy this exercise, even though it's here's the answer key. So you can see, I love it if somebody says they picked the cheapest appetizer, and then I can say, okay, Trish just had fried roaches, or you know. So they'll tell you, oh, I picked the cheapest, or I picked the most expensive, or those were the different coping strategies. So this is fun. I still use this at my training. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I have given it to you in your share drive. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about other content for tutor training, adult basic learners. This is also in your notebook, and we're going to take a look at some of it's actually 3:30. How's everybody feeling? Do we need to take a 5-10 minute break? Does everybody need to stand up, need to use the restroom? Do we need to break? Because I'll just keep talking. Want to take a 5-minute break? Does everybody need a break? Or
Some
we,
said that they
yes?
need a break. Some people are good, so
Okay, so should we just say if you need a break, just go ahead?
yeah,
We'll
maybe
keep
a
going.
5-minute, maybe a 5-minute break would be good for those who want to.
Okay, let's see.
Way they don't have to feel like they're missing anything. Another person said they'd like a break, please.
Okay. Okay, how long do we want to take? Want to just stand up in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or?
You guys can speak aloud. You can unmute to answer.
5 minutes is good. I think 5 minutes is good.
Okay, sounds good. Everybody stand up for 5 minutes, stretch. Walk around in a figure 8. You know about that secret? You walk around in a figure 8, get your brain thinking. Should we go? Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So we're just talking about content for tutor training for our adult education learners. And this is in your notebook, in your Train the Tutor Trainer notebook. But when we think about what kind of content we want to be teaching at a tutor training, here's some suggestions. So for reading, phonemic awareness, being able to attach a sound to a symbol, knowing that the letter T is a T sound, word families. Those are those, let's see, for a good example would be like ATE. Now let me use AKE, ache family, AKE, bake, cake, make, take, rake. So you just change out that first letter, and you are building upon quickly learning vocabulary based on the word family. Sight words, we talked about those. Those are those instantly recognizable words. Before we talked about the big 9 sight words, being able to recognize them in 3 seconds or less. Vocabulary, and how do we build vocabulary? And how do we, vocabulary is one of the pillars of good reading comprehension, because with reading comprehension, the learner will always go back to what they know. They're building upon knowledge from what they know. So vocabulary, fluency is that ease and that speed and that flow of reading, or are they struggling? Is the learner struggling and they're not flowing? So fluency is a good topic. Reading comprehension, that's the goal of all reading, right? We want to extract meaning from something that we've read. And the language experience approach, which we looked at I think 2 sessions ago or so. So actually, that whole reading list are things that I actually do teach at a new tutor training. I actually incorporate all those things in my new tutor training under that reading list. Now, under the writing list, the ones that I have always included were temporary spelling and the writing in everyday scenarios. I don't do a lot of writing at my new tutor trainings, but I emphasize, just like pro literacy, that we should be teaching reading, writing, speaking, and listening all simultaneously. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening. That's what pro literacy says. So the graphic organizer, I have taught it at a new tutor training and I won't do it anymore. I've taught it at a new tutor training. I have a great PowerPoint, great things I could share with you, but I just don't do it anymore. That to me would be more of an enrichment workshop. You know, there's so many other things that I want to squeeze into my new tutor training more than the graphic organizer. So punctuation and grammar, I don't even go into a lot of that unless I were doing strictly like an English language learner workshop, then maybe I would cover that more. That's just my 2 cents, my opinion on that. Handwriting, I really don't go over a lot at my new tutor training either. These would be more enrichment workshops for me. I like to just cover the basics and like I think it was Trish who said before, you know, we don't want to overwhelm our new tutors. They can be overwhelmed. I've seen that. So does this give you an idea of some of the things that you could possibly do for a new tutor training workshop for your presentation assignment? Okay, this I actually have in your shared drive as well. This is called the backwards reading exercise. And I love this. I actually keep one framed, and what I've put in your shared drive is this. I print this out and I frame it. And on the back of my, and it's just like a cheapy Staples frame. On the back of it, I actually have my little cheat sheet trainer notes. And I've actually given you all of my notes in there. So if you wanted to use this, you could. What I do is when we go to take a break, I'll say, I would like a volunteer to read something for us when we return from the break. And then I school the volunteer a little bit. And I tell them, you know, you're going to start reading where the asterisk star is, and you're going to read kind of backwards. And I don't really let them look at it because I want them to turn around to the group, and I don't want them to read perfectly. I want them to sound like a struggling reader. And if this is done correctly, it does. You know, people will be like, you know, Mark and what does that say? It looks like Cynthia, you know, live on, and sometimes it'll really sound like they're struggling. And it's funny because they'll do techniques that real struggling readers will do. They'll say, oh gosh, what does that say? Oh, you know, they'll do all those little techniques that you'll see a real struggling reader do. So I've seen, I've actually had a tutor do this one time, and the rest of the participants are like, what? This is going to be one of our tutors? You know, because he did such a believable way that he read this that you thought he was a struggling reader. So this is actually from the Lit Start book, and it's called the Backwards Reading Exercise. And I did stick it in your Google Shared Drive. And if you want to use it, go right ahead, even if you don't have the Lit Start book. I've given you the instructions, and like I said, you can make your own little training module like I have. I actually usually, well, you could put this up after to reveal what the tutor has just done. Of course, you wouldn't want this up while the tutor was reading it, if that makes sense. So that's the backwards reading exercise. Has anybody ever used the backwards reading exercise? It's kind of fun. You know, like I said, you maybe don't want to, you know, don't let them study it because you want that effect. Okay, and then some content for tutor training our English language learners. So here's some topics. And you might want to think about some of these for your project. You know, language acquisition theory, total physical response. So total physical response is getting the learner to respond with a movement rather than speaking. So for example, you could have a pen on the table or a pencil on the table, you know, and a book, and you could say to the English language learner, you know, pick up the pencil, you know, put down the pencil or point to the book. Or so they're doing bodily movements, or they're doing movements, but they're not actually answering. You're understanding that they comprehend what you're saying because through movement, but they're not actually having to speak to show their comprehension. And it's supposed to make the English language learner feel more comfortable because, you know, they can actually just respond through movement. I've seen people do wonderful, wonderful programs with total physical response, where with adjectives, where they would have the English language learners, you know, act out joy and sad. You know, a really wonderful program. So you can do a lot of creative things with total physical response. It's funny because at my tutor trainings, I like to do German once in a while. I think I mentioned I'm the first American in my family. So I grew up with my parents having English language barriers, and I saw my parents become citizens when I was about 8 years old. And so I usually do this after lunch, and I just start shouting German commands. I have them stand up and sit down and walk and turn around. You know, you know, I say aufstehen and hinsitzen and laufend and umdrehen, you know, and they actually can do it because I've demonstrated it first. You always demonstrate and then you model and then you have them follow you. But so the total physical response is an interesting concept. You can do a lot of things with it. You could put coins out on a table, you know, whether it's play money, or you could use real money and, you know, pick up the quarter, you know, pick up the dime, put the dime down, point to the penny, you know. You could see if they're understanding you. Is the comprehension there? So total physical response is interesting. I've seen some people do very creative things with it. I've seen people where they lined up the learners and they had them, you know, basically take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, or you know. So there's so much you can do with total physical response. You can watch films on it. ProLiteracy has films on it and so forth. ProLiteracy EdNet does. Okay, vocabulary drills is a great way to learn that vocabulary. There's a lot of information in I think I Speak English is one of the books. Tutor has some things where you do like substitution vocabulary drills. That's a great way to learn vocabulary and just to beef up that vocabulary. Conversation dialogue role plays is another great technique. Scenarios. I'm going to show you a couple. I threw a couple of ProLiteracy slides in here to show you about some of the different dialogue and role plays. Pronunciation, stress and intonation, you know, grammar, idioms, expressions. I've always found my learners love idioms and expressions. Your English language learners love that. I am really poor in idioms and expressions because I didn't hear them growing up. So I've had colleagues where they were teasing me, making fun of me because I didn't know the idioms and expressions. I can tell you a couple in German, but I didn't grow up hearing the English ones. So, and then listening and dictation, you know, being able to hear something and then being able to write it down. And that's important for anybody who wants to go for the US naturalization exam. So looking at some of these topics, are you getting ideas for your participant presentation assignment? For those of you who haven't decided yet?
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Okay, good. I'm just checking the chat real quick, see if anybody. Oh, Isabel's going to talk German.
I know only a little.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a ProLiteracy slide. I have included this in your Google Share Drive. like I said, ProLiteracy there's an awful lot of training content that they have, if you're a member. I have it all downloaded. Do I really use it? No, I don't. I use a slide here and there. I do think they have good material on vocabulary building. And I like this little one on dialogue. I'll just bring it all up here. So I think that's it. Oh, no, it's not. There we go. Okay. So this is a ProLiteracy slide on how to prepare a dialogue. So this is something I'd put up at a new tutor training, and we talk about dialogue and how role play is a great way to have an English language learner feel confident in their everyday interactions with others. And you could come up with a situation. You could actually have this as a activity. So you could divide people up into groups, and you could say, okay, come up with a different, scenario. Maybe you're at the bakery, maybe you're at the post office, maybe you're at a child's conference with the teacher. Maybe you're being pulled over for a speeding ticket. Maybe you're calling to make, I usually use an example in my tutor training where I pretend I'm on the phone and I'm making a doctor appointment. I will actually role play that, and I'll just hold up my phone and I'll role play the dialogue between me and the doctor, and then I act like I'm the learner and so forth and go back. So this is a great one. I have this in your shared drive. You could do this, how to prepare a dialogue, and then, oh yeah, they have a sample dialogue. ProLiteracy has a sample dialogue here of going to the post office.
I
A
have a
good-
question about this
Yes,
activity.
yes.
So is this, if it's part of the tutor training, so this is like getting the new tutors to think about how they could create this activity for the learner.
Exactly.
But are
Exactly.
you saying it could also be used as an actual activity for the learners? To like be creative and try to, if they're a little bit higher level, to work together to like write a
Yes,
story kind of thing? Or is that
absolutely.
not what you meant, but that's what I heard.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I would even use this I would have the tutors even work it out together. And then, yes, they could absolutely write something with their learner. I think it would certainly give their learner confidence. I've had quite a few learners that didn't feel comfortable or confident going into a teacher meeting. I don't know if that is just a common thing that I happen to find out, but yes. And so what are you going to ask the teacher? And what what do you want to know about, about your child in school and so forth? So absolutely, I'm going to say yes. Anything that the learner would benefit the learner and be relevant and immediate and help them. Definitely.
And this is something you can use when you have a class of multi-levels. The most advanced can write out the dialogue. The least advanced can practice package, the verb mail, the days of the week,
Oh,
that
sorry
kind
about
of thing. So, and
It can
you
be a
can,
learner activity.
yes, it can be a
Right.
learner activity at several different levels. If you have a large class with a multi-level, you can have the lowest learners work on vocabulary, and the next ones figure out what questions you might need to ask, and the most advanced ones write the whole script.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Reminds me of social stories I used to write for some autistic students, where they were going into a situation that they've never been to before, where you literally do this dialogue and they actually draw pictures of what it's going to look like if they, let's say, they're going on a field trip or something like that. But I really like this. But my question is, how do you fit this into, does all of this stuff fit into the 2-day training?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You could, if you didn't want to do this as an activity, you could just simply show these 2 slides.
Mhm.
I have shown these 2 slides, and it all depends how many people you have at the training and how often you want to break out into groups.
Mhm.
I am going to show you the one thing that I always do as a group activity is I break the participants, the potential tutors, and I have them do work on a lesson plan together.
Mhm.
And I quote unquote assign them a learner and a learner profile, which I've shared with you. I'm going to show it briefly because I feel like that activity gives them the most confidence ever. So I will show you that in a couple minutes.
Thank you.
So yeah, I have gone and just shown these 2 slides before. I have done that, but I do demonstrate usually. Like I said, I usually act like I'm I'm on the phone with somebody. Stress and intonation. Somebody might want to do something with this for their project, or maybe you want, I don't always teach this at a new tutor training. This sometimes could be more fun at like an additional workshop. But if you really have a lot of English language learners, you might want to do this stress and intonation. You know, natural speakers, you know, we tend to, you know, when we ask a question, we may raise our pitch or raise our, you know, at the end of the sentence. So it's just important, you know, we don't want to sound monotonous, just boring, talking straight like this, you know. So sometimes we might want to point out how, you know, stress and intonation is important, you know, during communication. So this is a pro literacy slide. You know, Roberto is sitting on the chair. Roberto is sitting on the chair. Roberto is sitting on the chair. You can have fun with this. Roberto is sitting on the chair. You know, Roberto is sitting on the chair. And Roberto is sitting on the chair. So you can have fun with this. This is something that your English language learners would probably enjoy doing. You know, so wanted to point that out too. This is something I actually like to do at my tutor trainings as well. I tend to have some tips about when I teach English language learners, and I don't know if any of you are doing any of these tips, but if you ask my son, who is 22, he will tell you that he thinks TV only comes with the closed caption. I love the closed caption because I even think it's great for literacy. And, you know, I always made my son watch it. And by the way, it's really funny. It doesn't always match up. And sometimes it's really, really funny. And you can get a good laugh out of the closed captions that come up on the TV. But I would tell, you know, English language learners, put your closed caption on, then you'll see the writing. You know, some of the other things is I've had the tutors do is like, tell the learner, I want you to call me and I want you to leave a phone message for me. I'm not going to pick up. Call me right back. I'm not going to pick up the phone, and I want you to record a message for me and tell me that we're going to meet next Tuesday night at 6:30, and I'm not going to pick up. And you make them practice by calling you and leaving that message. So a couple little things I will tell my tutors like that. I like, you know, nobody has photos nowadays. Most people don't get it printed out. But, you know, if you have a photo or two, I like to bring photos and show, oh, this is my dad. This is my dad with my son. Here they are at the Boy Scouts winning you know, the Pinewood Derby, you know, or it gets you to talk about Boy Scouts. It talks family relationships and so forth. So little things like that, I'll tell my tutors at my training workshops, some of the techniques that I do. Okay, so this is one I like to do. I've given this to you. It's in your share drive. So if you want to do this, you can do it too. Basically, what I'm doing here is I'm using a magazine picture to teach literacy. So that's another topic. You can use magazine pictures to teach literacy. So here I'm utilizing a magazine photo, and you know, you can print out anything nowadays from the internet. I like to print, this one is an actual photo, I think, from like Oprah's magazine, but you can print things out, you can put them on colored cardstock, you can laminate them. I have all kinds of those. I bring those to my trainings. I love a couple of printed out pictures. Okay, so the whole theory, and I'm not making this theory up, this exists, is to make it start from easy to more difficult. So the first question is just a yes or no answer. The first one is yes or no. Is there a dog in the picture? Is there a dog in the picture? And then they would say yes. Yes, there's a dog in the picture. So first one is yes or no, real simplistic. Still here, yes or no. Are these people walking in a forest? No, no, they're not. No. Okay, so now we get a little bit more difficult. We have a one-word answer. We're looking for a one-word answer. What is the woman holding? Now, remember, no answer is wrong here. If they say if they say umbrella, look, there's quite a few people holding umbrellas in there. So we're not looking for the correctness of the answer. We're looking if they understood it. So what is the woman holding? Umbrella. Here's another one-word answer. What color is the woman's umbrella? They say red or blue, polka dot, that's fine. And then it gets more progressively more difficult with the detailed answer. Well, what is the couple looking at? They can get really creative here. They can say, oh, they're watching a child build a sandcastle on the beach. Or wow, they see a boat out in the horizon. Or they see a whale. A whale just, flipped his tail up or something. You wouldn't believe, the detailed answers you're going to get here. You will get. What I love about using pictures to unlock literacy is that pictures are everywhere. And you can really, the tutors actually will have a good time at this. I will break them up into little groups, and I have pictures. After I show them this PowerPoint, I have the handout, which is in your shared drive. I have the handout for them to fill out and come up with their own questions and and I'll give them a picture. And of course, the crazier the pictures you can get, they love. Sometimes I have all kinds of pictures. I'll print them out, and like I said, I have them laminated, and they'll use those. And so here's another detailed answer. So what about this couple? Are they married? Do you think they're brother and sister? You can talk about family relationships. There's so much you can do with pictures and your English language learners. And so this is an activity I really use. I do use this. And so I've given it to you. You would probably just need some additional pictures that you could hand out and break them up into small groups, and then have the groups report back. I always warn them. Remember, I always warn the groups, I'm going to break you out into groups. You're going to take a look at this picture. I want you to come up with a question, a yes and no, a one-word answer, and I want you to come with a detailed question. These 3 types of questions. And then I'm going to have the group report when we stop, when we're finished.
Susan, if I really like this activity, if you were to do this in the training class on day 1 and gave the tutors an assignment to come in the next time for class with a picture, and then my thinking is they can then create a mini lesson on these, they come up with the questions. What kind of direction would you give them for, even if I was to cut out pictures?
Yes.
What kind of pictures am I looking for?
Oh, I have pictures of skydiving. I have pictures of school children on the bus. I have pictures of Thanksgiving dinners.
Okay.
All kinds of pictures.
Okay.
They like the funnier ones more, like, if I have a picture of a deer in a restaurant, or if you can find some oddball pictures, and they like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
What kind of time would you give to this activity?
Oh, probably only they don't need more than 5 to 10 minutes. If you have 2 or 3 people working on one picture together. Now I do, when I report it, I will take their picture. I think I mentioned to you, I like to set up my training room in a U shape. I like a U. There's different shapes and different table setups in your Train the Tutor Trainer book. The reason I like a U is, this is a good example. I will take their picture and I will walk up and down the U and show, here's the picture that Trish and Janet had. Here's the picture Trish and Janet had. And then I'll say, okay, Trish and Janet, go ahead and give us your one, your yes or no question, your yes or no question. And then you'll give your question, and then I'll just walk around the room and show the picture. And then I'll say, go ahead, Janet and Trish, go ahead and give us your one word question. And then go ahead and share your detailed question. And then it doesn't take that long. The reporting may take longer, but I think so maybe 10 minutes for the whole activity.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then one of the other things, you've probably heard of the term realia. And the term realia literally means just using items from everyday life. Just using items from everyday life in your tutoring sessions. So I always mention realia. Let's Start has a nice list. They call it everyday materials. In Let's Start, they call it everyday materials. I have more advanced lists of realia. If anybody wants anything like that, I can certainly share that with you. But it could be from shopping lists, recipes, it could be forms, job applications, menus. Menus is a great thing to bring. If you're doing even English Conversation Club, you can bring menus. Newspapers. I know a few people said that you love the other newspapers that you can get through Pro Literacy, the News for You paper. Catalogs, ads, advertisements, coupons, song lyrics, photos, cereal boxes, containers, bills, letters from work or school, money and coins. I have a couple of those little plastic money sets that I got off Amazon. Melissa and Doug makes a beautiful set with where it looks like a cashier's tray, but it doesn't, it doesn't store well. So I actually have just some of the cheaper ones that are just in a plastic container. And then I actually have a couple of themed kits. I keep one that's like my health kit, where it would have like a bottle of aspirin. It has a brand new toothbrush, a brand new comb, Band-Aids, Q-tips. I have just a couple of different things in there. And then, literally you can do total physical response. You could lay those health items out. You can use it in, different ways. You could write about it. You could, so yeah, you could do like an office kit, a health kit, tools kit. I even have some plastic, like vegetables and fruit, like from toys, like the children would use. You could use things like that. Your adult, I know we don't like the word adult basic education, but your learner probably would benefit, your adult basic learner would probably benefit from having some kind of a calendar. I have found that a lot of my adult basic learners that I've worked with over the years don't have good executive functioning skills. And so if you tell them, meet me here next Wednesday at 4 o'clock, if I collect all those calendars, those freebie calendars you get, I collect them and I use them with my learners, or I have used them with my learners in the past. So just to get them to write things on a calendar and track things. That's just my personal finding that I've had with adult learners, but yeah. So you can have fun with the realia. I thought I'd share this with you, this little research here. So how long does it take for a person to attain proficiency in English? So here's what the experts say. 4 to 7 years is what the first research study said. 5 to 8 years is required for those who want to go on for academic purposes. But I guess the general consensus is 2 to 4 years for basic oral language skills in English. When I come across a study like this, I will just make a slide and I'll keep it. I actually have, I have more to this particular, I just copied this one slide and put that in there for you. But when I find an interesting resource or fact or whatever, I will make a slide and I'll keep it because maybe I'll pop it in somewhere when I'm doing a presentation somewhere. So your tutors may ask you, how long does it take? And the general consensus is 2 to 4 years for oral language skills. Okay, so I have shared this lesson plan exercise with you in your shared drive, and I'm going to just briefly talk about it. This is based on using the Lit Start book, but you don't have to mention the Lit Start book if you don't use the Lit Start book. You could just use the people. I've made little profiles. You could just use the profiles and have them break out into groups. So this is how I say it. I break the people out into small groups. Okay. Here I said the exercise should only take you 20 minutes, but sometimes I'll have 4 or 5 people in a group, and sometimes I'll let them do like a half hour. I let them do a half hour, and sometimes I will ask them, do you want to work with an English language learner, or do you want to work with, an adult education person, an adult education learner? And sometimes I'll let them break up into the groups based on that. And I have both types of profiles in here. And I made these up. You are welcome to make your own up. But I've used these many times. And I will usually have some resources in the room, whether it's index cards, or sometimes I have like flashcards. I think I told you this. I like to set my training room up almost as a mini conference. I leave books out. I leave different things so that they can get up and use some of these materials when they're actually working on their lesson plan. And I do tell them that we're going to need one person who's going to report to the rest of us on what you've actually come up with for this lesson plan. So make sure that you're, taking notes. And I'm usually walking around and I'm seeing if they need my help, if they get stuck. Sometimes they get stuck. And I'll say, well, what do you think about this? The person has this goal, or the person has this goal. So you do want them to take learners' goals into account when writing the lesson plan. I have found that this activity really gives tutors confidence. Almost always after they've done this exercise with others in the training, they have confidence. And I'll point it out. I said, see, you made a lesson plan, you did great, and they enjoy sharing it. They do enjoy sharing their strategies that they've come up with. So this is kind of what it looks like. These are just 2 of the 5 learners that I have that I've shared with you. And so I would hand out one of these. You can print this out. I hand them this and I give them the Lit Start book, and I give point this out that they can use page 48, page 50 to 51, page 57 to 59. And I really let them look at that activity and work together. So hopefully they're looking at the goals needs part. So for example, with learner number 1 over there, Linda, her goals or needs, she wants to apply for a job in a restaurant. So what would be some good realia things that you could actually bring? Anybody have an idea?
Everything from table settings, silverware, plates, cups, saucers, menus, pen, notepad, basic vocabulary. May I take your order? Going
Yes.
through menus, what's on the menu, how to spell it, what it is. Pictures of foods. If she has a particular restaurant that she's aiming for, like American food or a Chinese restaurant, a category. So the kinds of foods that are in that type of restaurant.
Exactly. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Faye. So I have given you this. If you'd like to use it, feel free to use it. I do feel like a lesson plan exercise definitely gives the tutors confidence. So you might want to consider doing that. Okay, page 42 in the notebook. Okay. So this is a little bit about this. You do have this PowerPoint and it's in your notebook as well. This is a little bit getting your tutors to think about coming up with individual learning plans for students and their goals. So how to do goal setting, how to plan lessons based on the individual learner's needs and skills, and looking at a sample lesson plan. Again, you can remind them about adult learners, how they have a lot of experience. They learn by building on what they already know. And they like to know what to expect. These are things that we've talked about already, characteristics of adult learners. And you do have this PowerPoint if you want to use any of it. Goal setting. Goals should be individualized. They should provide a focus for the tutor and the student. It should help the tutor plan the lessons and help the student understand their progress. But the most important thing is that your learner's goals can change and will change. One of the sheets I actually have is like a goal progress check-in, where the tutor will work with the learner and say, hey, how are we doing? Do you feel like you're making improvements in these areas? Are these the goals you still want to stay on track with? Just having that conversation. So here's a little discussion. The tutor says, well, what are your goals for our work together? And the student says, well, I want to be a better reader. And then the tutor will say, okay, well, what would you do if you were a better reader? And the student says, well, I'd like to be better at making meals that are good for my family. So the tutor says, well, 6 months from now, what would you like to be able to do that you don't do now? I think that's how we get to what the learner really wants. What is it that you want to be able to do 6 months from now that you don't do now? So tutors should work with their student to identify long-term goals and short-term goals. We have to break them down. A lot of times we'll say, well, I just want to become a US citizen, or I just want to learn how to read better. Well, how are we going to get there? We have to break it down. So we have to determine the long-range goal. We have to develop components, develop subcomponents, and repeat all of this until it's manageable for a lesson. So putting it all together, we're going to take a look at a sample lesson plan. So here's a sample 90-minute lesson. Now, I always left it up to my tutors and my learners how long they were going to meet. Some of them like to meet 60 minutes. Some of them like to meet 90 minutes. Some of them will meet 2 hours. I think that's really a personal choice between the tutor and the learner, and whatever they agree upon. So here's a sample 90-minute lesson plan. So you review the previous material. If the learner worked on something at home, I don't necessarily like the word homework, but for this particular case, I use that word there. But you would review any material. You would look at maybe some new material, practice that new material, and then provide some reinforcement, and just mention that if they, however much they work on in this at home, if they can work on it at home for 10 or 15 minutes and bring it back to you the next time, they definitely will have built upon their skill sets. And then you could just read for fun. You know, a lot of there's a lot of research out there on just reading aloud with your learner. So there's different techniques on read alouds with your learners. You know, you can read a page, they can read the next page. They can just be read to out loud just to hear it. You can also do different techniques where you read together, but your voice, you fade out and let the learner just read. So there's all kinds of little techniques that you can do with read alouds. You know, if anybody wants more information, I can share more information on that. Sometimes I don't do all that at a new tutor training. I do that more at an enrichment workshop, but I'm just want to expose you to some new ideas and new concepts. Okay, so let me see if there's any other, what questions do you have so far about anything? Mona said action pictures, get action pictures. I have a couple fun slides coming up, so. We covered a lot of content today.
In your fun reading, if you've got someone that is interested in Westerns or mysteries or romance or whatever, you can have a book that you only get to read in class at the end of class. And if it's a book that really matches their interest, they're going to be eager to come back and hear the next part of it. And that easily will translate into their wanting to get another library book in that genre and reading it on their own.
That's great. I like that. Can't read this till we get together next time. Mona wants to remind everybody it's important to find out what interests them. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I said I threw a couple of fun slides in here because I mentioned that you should always be telling your library or your literacy program success stories. So I will get quotes from learners and I will get quotes from tutors and I will frame them and I like to put them around my room when I train. I actually like to put them on my windowsills and all around the room to get people excited about tutors and learners, what they have to say about the literacy program. The other thing is, if you put an article out there, some kind of a PR article out there explaining your literacy program, you can ask the learner and the tutor if you can quote them. So I've done that before. I literally just threw in a quote to one of the PR pieces that we submitted to the newspaper. So here's an example of one that I just put in here to show you. This is a lovely lady, and she says, I chose to become a citizen because of love, life, and liberty. This is a new opportunity in my new country. The library helped me a lot, not a little, a lot. I struggled and became frustrated trying to learn English. My tutors and the librarians were there the whole way. And Josefina is a doll.
Hey, Susan, real quick. There was a
Yes.
question in the chat. If they should do the lesson plan activity on the first day or the second day?
I actually wait till the second day at the very end because I feel like they've learned all these strategies over the course of 2 days. And it's kind of like my conclusion.
Thank you.
Thank you. And here's one from a tutor. And she says, I truly believe that to be successful, one must experience success. This is why I think that it is so important to build on students' strengths when tutoring. I enjoy the library literacy program because I can learn from others and do what I love doing, teaching. So I recommend trying to collect a few learner stories, tutor stories. I like to frame them and put them around the room. When I go out and I do a presentation, especially if I'm kind of, I don't want to say begging for money, but if I'm kind of looking for money, you know, I like to set that up. And then I told you I have some fun pictures here. I threw one in for buttons. So I included this information in your resources. This is from USA Buttons. I actually bought I've purchased a few button machines before from USA Buttons, and it cost about 4 cents to make one of these. And I've included the information on if you want to make these the cheapest way to go. And I have some that actually I do like in bright yellow and red and blue, and it says something to the effect like, you know, my superpower is being a tutor, and that's the one they always want. So I will put these out, you know, on the table at my new tutor training. I have different ones, you know, depending on different themes. Just a fun thing. Or you can keep them and give them out when they come up and help you. Just fun. And then I wanted to show you, I also put this in your shared drive, if you wanted to make wanted posters. So when I have a new tutor training, I actually like to hang stuff like this up. And the wanted really are people that need to be matched up. But I don't really put their name on that because I've hung this up in the hallway right outside my new tutor training. So it catches a lot of attention. And I'll get new people that want to become a tutor when they see this, because it really does attract a lot of attention. But if you want to have fun and make your own wanted posters, I've included some templates. And I think we're getting to, let's see. Yeah. So I'll take a few questions if there's any questions about anything that we've talked about today. So, but what I really want to tell you before we leave, so what if you do a tutor training or you do a presentation and you felt like it wasn't your best? I want you to understand that the good news is that your audience actually liked you more than you know. Our own self-critical thinking makes us underestimate how much other people like us. And this is called the liking gap. And this was a research study conducted by Erica Boothby at Cornell, that people tend to believe they were liked less than to the degree that they were actually liked. And even if you have high self-esteem and you still think that you weren't liked, you are liked more than what you believed. So anyway, I thought this was fun. This is from an article called The Liking Gap in Conversations. Do people like us more than we think? Psychological science. I know I mentioned to you, I love to read this type of stuff. But what I want you to take away as a trainer is that people like you more than you believe it. So even if you think you flopped, you didn't. The potential tutors are still loving on you. Okay, so I want you to take that from here today. All right, so we're just about done. I would like to know, what questions do you have? Because I think we're just about wrapping up. So anything about anything we went over today, what questions do you have? Oh, I see Loretta asked a question. It's USA Button, and I have it in your share drive. I literally have a button folder, and I actually have printed out what you should purchase if you want the cheapest version. If anybody decides they get the button, you want templates, I can send you all my design templates. All right, what questions do you have about anything we did today?
Loretta also asked about the poster.
Oh, the wanted posters, I actually shared them with you, and you can just change them up. They're templates, easy to change up templates. They're in your Google Share Drive. I think I called it wanted.
And Wanda asked about presentation tips.
Does somebody have a question?
Do you have any goal setting PowerPoint?
The one there, Mona, you could use, I actually have another one. I could send it to you.
Yeah, would you do that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I actually did it for Citrus County many years ago, so I can send I can send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be good.
This is Vonda. I just want to verify it's 5 minutes or less. And how many slides?
Oh, which one is 5 minutes? I'm sorry,
The
Rhonda.
presentation. I just want to make sure it's 5 minutes or
Oh,
less. And is there a certain number of slides before I edit it and, rehearse and
no,
practice?
no. If you actually want to make it longer, and you could say something to the effect like, this is actually, much longer than what you would,
Yeah,
in normal circumstances, would your presentation be 15 minutes and you're only showing a 5-minute portion? Is
right.
that, you could do
Yeah,
that.
that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
You could do
Yeah.
that. You could leave your 15-minute portion and just, say, in normal circumstances, we would be doing, this in its entirety.
Okay. All right. And so where do I state the objectives? Do I just send that to you when I send you the PowerPoint?
Yeah, do you want to add a slide in there that says objectives?
Well, I think I got enough slides already.
Okay,
That's probably
okay.
why I didn't.
That's okay. You
So,
can
I
just
mean,
tell us. You could always just tell us. You could say the
yeah.
objectives of this particular PowerPoint would be,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
All righty. All right. Thank you. That
Thank you,
helps.
Vonda.
You're
Good,
welcome.
good.
Susan, if we wanted to make a poster of, let's say, one of the charts that you showed, the anatomy of a good tutor, would we just go to your Google Drive that you shared and print it out and do it that
Yes.
way? Bring it.
Yep.
Okay.
It's just that
Okay,
that's
great.
a pro literacy slide. You can print it out even like that. It's funny that you say that because I actually do print them out, laminate them, and sometimes hang them on the doors in the room just to,
Mhm.
for color.
Yeah, and they're really great.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? What questions do you have before we end for the day?
What was your deadline or hope for deadline for submitting these so that they can get organized for the final session?
I would say probably a day or two before. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Some people have actually sent them already. I'm starting a folder, but no rush. You can wait till a day or two before. All right, Zara, you still there? I think, did we lose her?
Sorry,
Oh, sorry, there she is. Sorry.
yes, I'm here.
All right. Are we all wrapped up for today then?
Yes, I think it was a great session. Is everybody good?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday again.
Okay, have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.